My sister's boyfriend was a thrill seeker. He'd say, let's try something different, and next thing you know, my sister was getting her ears gauged. It wasn't long before her ears got infected, and she was in excruciating pain. For her own safety, I told our parents about it, and she finally cut ties with that dude. But instead of thanking me, she held a grudge. One night, while I was sleeping, she straight up suffocated me with a pillow. I blinked, and suddenly, I was back in time, right when my sister was bouncing around the idea of getting her ears pierced. My sister was staring in the mirror, fiddling with her earlobe, a hint of doubt in her eyes. Hey, Lily, what do you think about me getting my ears gauged? I rushed over, plastering a big smile on my face. Oh my god, totally. That'd be so cool, sis. You'd be turning heads everywhere you go, and your boyfriend would probably be, like, even more obsessed with you. No sooner had the words left my mouth than she was already blushing and covering her face. She batted her eyelashes a few times, then leaned in, whispering, I kind of thought so too. Watching her beam like that, I knew my gamble was paying off. My sister kept preening in front of the mirror for a long time before practically skipping out the door. Only once her shadow disappeared did I relax, collapsing onto the couch. Last time, she asked me the exact same thing, and I'd freaked out. Sis, what if it gets infected and starts bleeding? That's gonna be bad. And what's worse, you could cause damage, maybe even puncture your eardrum. I kept rattling off all the possible consequences, hoping she'd ditch the whole idea, but I never even noticed her annoyed expression. She pushed past me. You don't know anything, it's called being fashionable. Besides, it'll really make Brad happy. That stopped me dead in my tracks. What did you just say? She just stormed out, mumbling, just mind your own business. Thinking about it now, I couldn't help but laugh. All she wanted was my approval. When I said something that went against what she already wanted, she completely shut me out. And all I did was worry about her safety, the dumbass I was. Looking at the picture on the coffee table, a picture of my sister and me, I couldn't help but think about how her ears looked that night, all inflamed and oozing while she cried her eyes out in bed. This time around, if I hadn't intervened, her situation would have been even worse. When evening rolled around, my sister came swaggering in. She pointed straight to her ears as soon as she entered. I did it! What do you think? I jumped up, practically running to her, faking as much awe as I could muster. Sis, you're so brave. It looks amazing. If I wasn't such a scaredy cat, I'd totally get mine done too. My sister scoffed. You're such a dork, you'd never understand. Then she pulled out her phone and snapped a pic, sending it right away to Brad. A few seconds later, Brad was calling her on video. He was so hyped, a little bit surprised too. Babe, you actually did it? Whoa, when are you gonna size it up for me? I can't wait to. Hello? I'm still in the living room. My sister coughed awkwardly, then shot a dirty look at me. I quickly shuffled over to the couch. Just as long as it doesn't get infected, it's all good. Always in such a rush. I did this all for you. You can chill for a bit. My sister's voice was barely audible by the time it faded away. The next day, my sister was up bright and early. She was a night owl, but this time she was determined to avoid any infection. She was getting her sleep early and drinking plenty of water. 3 times a day, she took her antibiotics, chugged liters of water, and did some light exercise. Her stretched ears were looking great, and watching her switch out different sized plugs, a strange mix of dread and excitement bubbled up inside me. Just 2 weeks in, her ears were already stretched to 25 millimeters, and her earlobes looked so fragile, like they could just rip off at the slightest touch. After this last size swap, she wiped away a tear. I'm not coming home tonight. Can you cover for me with mom and dad? I nodded. You got it, sis. I'll take care of it. Looking at her ear, almost deformed, a shiver went down my spine. My sister came home the next day around noon, looking absolutely drained. Her ears were swollen and red. When she saw me staring at her ears, she lost it, yelling, "What are you looking at? Never seen ears before?" Before I could even respond, she slammed her bedroom door shut. Earlier, when I'd looked at her ears, her plugs were gone, and strangely, the holes looked bigger than the day before. She didn't come out for lunch. It wasn't until my parents were getting ready for bed that they noticed something was wrong. Lily, your sister hasn't come out since she got back. I chimed in, sounding worried. Yeah, she hasn't even used the bathroom. Hearing that, my parents went pale, and they started banging on her door. After what felt like an eternity, my sister answered weakly, Mom, Dad, I feel awful. My parents, already panicked, couldn't take it anymore. My dad actually grabbed an axe and started smashing the door in. The moment the lock broke, my mom rushed in, me right behind her. My sister was in bed, her face flushed, her lips pale. Seeing us, she opened her eyes halfway and mumbled in pain, Mom, I hurt all over. My dad was terrified. He scooped her up and rushed her to the hospital. That's when they finally noticed her stretched ears. Since getting her ears gauged, she'd been doing a great job hiding it, avoiding meals with my parents. Whenever my parents were home, she'd hide in her room. Every time my parents tried to talk to her, she'd use the excuse that she was studying for the civil service exam. What parent would disturb their kid during a time like that, right? My parents were no different. I saw my dad carrying my sister on his back. Her ear was almost touching his shoulder. In that moment, my mom's eyes turned red with rage. My dad saw it too, and barely containing his anger, he said, let's just get her to the hospital first. It wasn't very busy at the hospital that late. After hooking my sister up to an 4-drip, the doctor called my parents outside. This is an infection caused by excessive ear stretching. I saw the young lady's ears were inflamed. Looks like she forced the expansion with something. It caused a fever from the infection. She will be fine after it goes down. Just make sure she drinks a lot of water and avoids reinfection. Hearing the doctor's words, my dad's fists clenched. Unlike other parents, my dad was really old-fashioned. He didn't let my sister or me wear skirts to school or wear makeup. You should focus on studying. Who are you trying to impress, all decked out like that? I remember when my sister secretly got her ears pierced back in high school. My dad beat her with a broom until it broke into pieces. He didn't even calm down after that. My mom listened to my dad like he was some kind of god. After the doctor left, my dad kicked the door wide open. My sister, who was half asleep, was startled awake. My dad raised his hand and slapped her across the face without saying a word. Look at yourself. Do you look like you're a normal human being? Dressed up all crazy. You've brought so much shame to our family. Before she could even cover her face, he slapped her again. Are you trying to kill me? Just as my dad was about to hit her again, my mom grabbed his arm. Her eyes were red. Are you trying to kill your own kid? She's this sick right now. Can't we just discuss this at home? I hurried over and stood in front of my dad, begging for my sister. Dad, please just forgive her. She's probably just under a lot of stress studying. After a lot of convincing, my dad calmed down a bit. I went to my sister carefully. Sis, don't worry, Dad's not angry anymore. She looked at me like I was an idiot. Dad has always favored me. Of course he's not angry at me. Even though her face was swollen, she still managed to keep a tough persona. I quickly changed my tone. That's so true, sis. She wasn't wrong. My parents favored my sister, always. That's why last time when she suffocated me with a pillow, the first thing she did was run to my parents. My mom was crying like crazy, and my dad was so angry he had turned pale. Then, they both just sighed. What's done is done. We'll just bury your sister and say that she ran off with a guy. This time, although my dad had slapped her twice, the concern in his eyes was obvious. I slowly stood up and walked over to my parents. My mom wiped her tears. Lily, you didn't do anything crazy, right? Before I could even respond, my dad kicked me to the ground. She wouldn't dare. If you ever get a hole that big in your ears, don't even think about coming home. I got up as fast as I could, biting my lip and trying to hide my anger. Mom and Dad, I didn't do anything. It was always my sister's fault, yet I always ended up getting punished. I've gotten used to it by now. Looking at their faces, I kept hearing the same conversations over and over. We were both their kids, so why did they treat us so differently? After my sister finished her 4-drip, it was almost sunrise. My mom told me to go get the meds. My dad carried my sister, still sleeping, and the three of them went down to the parking garage. When I came back with her medicine, I couldn't find them anywhere. Mom, where are you? I called, trying to find out. My mom fumbled with her words. Your dad said your sister needed some rest, so he took us home first. You can grab a taxi. She must have felt guilty because she hung up soon after. I sighed and grabbed a taxi home. Luckily, I had my house keys, or I would have been waiting outside all morning. The house was quiet. My parents were still asleep, snoring away. I tiptoed into my room, getting into bed, ready to make up for lost sleep. But as soon as my head hit the pillow, tears started streaming down my face.